splash of horror. I know last week I showed a bit of this, but there's something that I didn't explain, and it's kind of a big thing. Golden Age comic books, Silver Age comic books, to Bronze Age, to current comic books are different sizes, right? This is technically a current age comic book size. Here is a coverless version, or well, it's a coverless copy of an issue of Mysteries Weird and Strange with a fantastic Iger Shop a splash page right there, the Howling Horror. You will notice a couple of things on this. One, the page, of course, it's tanning. The colors are slightly faded. This is a Golden Age comic book, folks. These are the dimensions if you bought one back in the early 1950s. Here is my reproduction of that page, the Howling Horror. You will notice a couple of things right off the bat. It is much cleaner. It's more vibrant. The colors are better. But there's another thing about it. It's the exact same size as the Golden Age splash page. Follow the vertical lines. That's what I'm saying. You will see that it is almost precisely the same dimensions. So what I've done in this current comic book is that I have pushed the margins. I push them to the edges, and it's fine. It's not a problem. It doesn't cut anything off. I was extremely careful. In a typical comic book, as you can see, check out those margins. What I simply did is I made sure that the, splash pages matched as much as possible to the original size of the Golden Age comic book. Basil Wolverton's Swamp Monster, you are getting the full size that you would have gotten in the pre-code comic book. Stanley Morris in the 60s, he put out the magazines Shock, Chilling Tales of Horror, Stark Terror, etc. And they were reprints of a ton of his pre-code horror comic books, such as Weird Mysteries and Weird Tales of the Future and Weird Chills. I reproduced these directly from my magazines, and they turned out beautifully. Death Prowls the Streets, that of course is Jack Cole. And then 10,000 Years Old, that is a young Ross Andru. Years before Spider-Man, Ross Andru was doing pre-code, and he did this one for Weird Tales of the Future. This is split up into 3 sections. The first section has, of course, the color splash pages. And the second section is Stanley Morris. Check out Lynn Streeter's art for the Zombie's Eyes. And then you have Ogden Whitney on the opposite side with Captain Crossbones. And while that's more of a dark fantasy, not exactly a horror one, that splash page is just too good. I could not leave it out. I did all of these reproductions, folks. Check out the Bat in the Brain. Gus Rica, another great Golden Age artist. So then in section 3, which is Eerie Publications. Eerie Publications would take the original art and they would do one of 2 things. They would gorify it. In other words, they would add blood and graphic gore. This is a good example here. This is Monster Mill, originally from Haunted Thrills. And as you can see, the woman's face, she's got a chunk ripped out of her face. That was not in the original. The blood, that's not in there. So they added that stuff for Eerie Publications. There's Voodoo Dolls. Now, I love the story. I love that splash page. It's really quite cool, right? I'll bring it back a little bit. Witch's Curse on the other side is also really groovy too. So what I do is I also present some of these splash pages as they were published in color. And then Stanley Morris and his fantastic black and white reproductions in his magazines in the 1960s. Check out that freaking Voodoo Dolls. I just dropped the link so you can check it out and read a little more about it and buy it. Now I have a link that's domestic shipping, US, and then I have 3 links at the bottom, Canada, Australia, and the UK. I could not believe these guys, the way the print job, absolutely fantastic. You could call it a comic book. I kind of call it an art book or a reference book. You might even call it a bit of a fanzine too, because I am a pre-code horror comics fan. If the splash page doesn't catch you, you're going to move on to the next story, and you might read that one before you come back to the other story. It's just got to have a grabber. That's why I did Splash of Horror. You know, I love the splash pages. There's a certain connection that I have with them as a kid growing up, and I remember seeing the Eerie publication stuff. Of course, Warren Publications, Eerie and Creepy. You'd go get an issue of Creepy or Eerie, and you got the great cover on there by Frank Frazetta or Richard Corbin. But then you open it up, and you got like 6 or 7 stories. And for me, I'm going through them. I'm going to read the ones with the eye-catching splash page first.